Delmar Divide, which is a really catchy phrase for this really complex thing here in St. Louis.
Not only the history of segregation, but the way that that still plays out today in St. Louis, and some of the kind of socioeconomic disparities that have come along with that we can see within a couple blocks along this city street.
The public health disparities, the wealth disparities are real between south and north of Delmar. However, my strong feelings are that Delmar Divide is oftentimes a bastardization of the story of the communities north of Delmar.
To help deconstruct the meaning of the Delmar Divide, from its mixed history to some of the revitalization going on today, we spoke with 3 experts who each give walking tours of different St. Louis neighborhoods. Aaron Williams in the Ville, Ryan Deloach in Dutchtown, and Amanda Clark in Laclede's Landing, where Colonial St. Louis began.
The Delmar Divide, a lot of people think of just Delmar the street, or maybe they're thinking of the Central West End or the Loop, or they're thinking of a midtown kind of away from the river, because we as modern St. Louisans have turned our backs to the river. But we have to start here when we're talking about the Delmar Divide, because this is where those complexities of modern St. Louis begin. So we're standing here on Morgan Street in Laclede's Landing. Cool street to get to show folks because this is Delmar. This is the street that becomes Delmar. It starts at the riverfront. That Missouri came into the Union as a slave state, as part of the Missouri Compromise. And when you're standing here and you're thinking about, what happened here and the decisions that were made, and then you realize you're looking right across the Mississippi River at a free state, and we can kind of, again, pick apart those layers of that story. And
around that same time, one of those layers was developing just north of the Divide, a thriving Black community often referred to as the Ville.
When someone says Delmar Divide, they don't say, yeah, and Scott Joplin lived north of Delmar. In fact, his house is right there on Delmar or Morgan Street. They don't say the Club Riviera was one of Black St. Louis's favorite clubs in the city or the entire region, and it was literally on Delmar, representing the Black side of the Delmar Divide, which is what we now understand to be North St. Louis. So I like to position the story in a way where I can celebrate those things, right? We're standing in the Ville community in front of a mural of Tina Turner, who grew up in the Ville, graduated from Sumner High School. And in that same community, you had prizes like Homer G. Phillips Hospital. You had Annie Malone's Poor Old College. All these things that really anchored the Black community in success.
But as with many places across the region and the country, red line laws and other segregationist rules wore down some of those successes in the Ville, until a groundswell of community organizing that began in the late 1970s and really picked up momentum in the wake of the Ferguson protests.
Here recently, for the Ville and the city's City Planning and Urban Design Agency have begun the neighborhood planning process and the MLK Corridor character planning process. So over the next year, we will be doing some deep planning work with community members to decide what we want this community to look like in the future and what we want this corridor to look like in the future.
In the Dutchtown neighborhood, the dividing line was actually along Chippewa Street for much of the last century, with most of the Black population to the north and the white residents to the south. But things started to change in the 1980s in a different, unexpected way.
So when we talk about the population in Dutchtown today, yes, there's a large Black population, there's a large white population, but there's also a growing Hispanic population in this area, and a growing immigrant population. People from all over the world, all moving in and starting to have businesses and things that cater to those populations.
Ironically, that melting pot of diversity has now become one of the selling points for the neighborhood.
Yeah, and I think in some ways, it does provide some type of template, right? When we're talking about St. Louis and segregation today, right? There are a lot of neighborhoods that are very segregated. And this is kind of a template of how that can change within a relatively short period of time. And people can be intentional about that and welcoming people to those different neighborhoods.
That type of energy has brought the support of groups like St. Louis Development Corporation. As 2 years ago, they opened the Northside Economic Empowerment Center to bring small business support opportunities and entrepreneurship support opportunities right to the heart of the Ville community, north of the Delmar Divide. So our civic and public leaders are doing the work that we need to be done to preserve and restore a lot of these communities north of Delmar that we oftentimes show pity for. We want to restore that pride and support the community work that's already happening here. And I would say that it is definitely being done.
I think part of it does have to do with the density of the area, right? And part of it has to do with the input of people in the community that are pushing for these properties and things to be repurposed, but not just to be repurposed, but to be repurposed in a way that it's an asset for the community and that it actually serves the community that's here rather than trying to bring people, from somewhere else. This is redevelopment that's geared towards the community that's already here and that already exists in the neighborhood.
What's great about my job and interesting about what I get to do is kind of dismantling that, taking it apart, and helping people realize that not only is it not as simple as black and white, but it is not as simple as one side of the street or the other side of the street.
If you'd like to learn more about the Delmar Divide and its evolution, visit the STL Walking Tours page on the Missouri History Museum website.